As I suspect most people listening know very well, late last week Donald Trump tested positive for COVID-19. It seems the diagnosis was inevitable, but still unbelievable. What has followed this week since has been utter chaos, with Trump's recklessness and disregard for others on full display, misinformation, conspiracy, and scrambling on both sides to fit this into an election narrative. First thoughts, Ed?
Well, it's Donald Trump, isn't it? Theater. He's made theater, tragedy theater. This is Shakespearean, where the lead character is going to commit suicide, and it takes 3 acts for the suicide to happen. So this character is committing suicide. My own feeling about this when I heard it was, this is his way out. He's down in the polls. He gets the disease. He says he can't continue. He asks for pity, and that pity leads to everyone pardoning for all of his sins. But he's taken a different tack, and that tack is to use the disease as a prop for his new nonsense, and that is almost anybody can overcome that. Now, he needs to go back 208,000 people for that one to really work. And that's not going down well either. So he must have some other act in mind. We have 27 days to the election. 4 million people have already voted. Over 50% of the people who have been polled want Joe Biden. Now, when you worry in polls when you're below 50%, apparently Biden has nothing to worry about. In one poll, he's ahead 16% nationally. He's ahead, well ahead in all the so-called important breakthrough states, the battleground states. So now Trump is trying to use theater as a way to get attention. Part of that attention is to put on him. The other part is to put on the election, where he can say the election's null and void. And like, who was it that walked across the water? Jesus, or whoever it was, Moses. He will part the waters of this election and claim himself the victor.
Trump is back in the White House, back at work, supposedly.
A very bad news thing to do. Can you imagine your office allowing you in to the studio while you're contaminated? As a matter of fact, it's against the law in New South Wales.
It's I'm not infected, but it's in fact exactly why I happen to be recording this one from home today, because we have had some connection with an active COVID case. Obviously, that situation is now within the White House boundaries. As someone pointed out, the worst of the disease might be yet to come. In many cases, the worst symptoms come 8 or more days after infection. If Trump dies, heaven forfend, is there any kind of precedent as to what happens next so close to an election?
Yeah, the election goes on. I think one candidate died the day of the election or a day or two after. Yeah, Harrison, when he came back from being sworn in, he died the next day. So it just goes on. Mike Pence then becomes the president or the candidate, and then Pence has to select someone at the end of the election with the help of his party to be the vice president. So the beat goes on. The thing that Biden has to do now is just stay healthy, demonstrate that he's healthy, robust, eager, and energetic.
And the outbreak surrounding Trump, this revolves around this Rose Garden party for the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Ironically, the process around that nomination could now be delayed. Dems are certainly hoping delayed indefinitely. What's going on?
Well, this is true. This was a super spreader event, and the entire communications portion of the White House got it, including some people who never expected to have it, and including Chris Christie, governor of New Jersey, who was prepping Trump for the debates. There's no hiding from this now. There's no joking about it. But the Republicans want to try to make lemonade out of these lemons. And the lemonade they're hoping for is some speedy recovery. Now he's on everything, including some delusion-making drugs. And maybe other people in the White House will go on him. But the White House will not be a secure place for months to come, to be occupied by anyone. And if I were elected president, I would go to the Blair House to live and not in the White House. This is super serious. And for him to make it the latest stage, you know how they go on in the acts and they change the furniture? Well, now he's changing the furniture, but the act is going on.
Still on COVID, and Trump has announced he is pushing back financial stimulus negotiations until after the election, or more accurately, until after he wins the election. The Trump Republicans are kind of changing tune on this one. They want to talk about airline aid, so this one is really just up in the air at the moment. But it seems like a terrible strategy.
Was that a pun or not an intended pun?
You're holding.
He's trapped in his own delusions. He thought he could stop this as a way of getting people to vote for him because they would get a big stimulus package after he was elected. Well, it bit him in the aid because the airlines stopped running and members of Congress cannot get to Washington to vote. The senators can't get from home. They're out campaigning. There's no airline to bring them to Washington. So the other thing is airlines are super important in the United States in the absence of good railroads. So here we have a situation where the United States is paralyzed. And Trump had to reckon with that. Finally, someone got in his ear. They also thought they should throw some money at the people. The Democrats probably will not accept the deal. They'll probably say, unless you throw in the states, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if he does all that, then the Democrats declare victory and say, we got you all these things. It wasn't Trump. So again, as a friend of mine was saying this morning, they thought COVID got you in the heart, not in the ASS.
The vice presidential debates, Ed, at time of recording, it's only just wrapped up. We actually delayed our usual recording time so we could watch it and be across it before we spoke. It was there wasn't really much to match up to in terms of the presidential debate in terms of maturity.
It was a typical vice presidential debate. Nothing. Very few people watched it. There wasn't anything to see. Each one of them just rolled out their pat remarks. Now, I think for Harris, this was important. If she'd acted like a prosecutor, she would have turned a lot of people off. So by being kind of Melba toast, she didn't hurt herself. She didn't hurt Joe. She talked about Joe all the time, not herself. And I think the vice president was actually damn good. If anybody won the debate, he barely won it. He was obnoxious, but what he had to say made sense. He didn't tell a bunch of lies. He told a few. But I think he won this debate, but so what?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably Kamala probably told a few porkies herself along the way.
Oh, absolutely.
For Kamala, it was an important one, as you say. I think she's trod this line very well, where even just as a black woman, you know, this is a historical moment. As a black woman, she had to walk a very thin line as to show strength, which she absolutely did, without being the angry black woman.
That's absolutely the case. And everyone was expecting her to be as she was on the Judiciary Committee, and she wasn't. But people were expecting the vice president to be flat like he usually is. and he'd obviously prepared. So I think he was pretty good. He was actually generous. He congratulated her on being a Black woman. He affirmed some of the things she was saying as being important, judicial issues and the like. So he was almost a gentleman. He defended the president better than the president can defend himself. He did not attack her on her record very much. And when he did, he attacked the soft side of her record. So she didn't have many comebacks to that. And she had to represent Biden, not her record, which she did very well. So all in all, it was 55-45, I would say. And I'd give the vice president 55.
Back on taxes, just back on Trump with his taxes, I should say. A federal court has ruled the Manhattan District Attorney can obtain President Donald Trump's tax returns, although this is again being sent to the Supreme Court to delay. Eric Trump also deposed in the case this week. What's going on?
Well, the taxes are now ending their run. This tax business will probably get into the courts in December. Settlements and all this kind of stuff and depositions rather, will take until January or February. So as far as Trump is concerned, this is way out there. Now, we still don't know what happens if he loses the race. It was interesting that Harris dodged that one, but I think she answered it in a slightly different way. She mentioned all the generals and CIA people that were on their side. That tells me they actually have a small army of people to get Trump out of the White House. So she was sending a very subtle message. Didn't send it well, but I think that's what's going on. One of the problems Trump has now is he's getting very low turnout of his own base. They're not going to vote for him. It seems though his getting the disease has made them think, like any Muhammad or Jesus or whomever, when they go up on the cross, a lot of our followers leave. And he's on the cross now, and it is pretty evident that Trump's base will not go to the polls. He's also frightened them from going to the polls, but energized blacks. As a black man, I can tell you, the thing you need to do is tell me I can't do something. Like I can't vote, or I'm going to keep you from doing something. Boy, that energizes the black community. And when the grandmas and people start coming after you, you get out there and do everything you can. And Michelle Obama's out there, so we're going to be there.
We'll talk more on the election race in just a moment, but before we do, the Breonna Taylor case, there's been calls to reopen the case with a special prosecutor after the disappointing results we've seen so far in terms of investigation. Any thoughts on this one, Ed?
Yeah, I think right now Biden will throw this to the governor, who's a Democrat, surprisingly, in Kentucky. And the governor wants to try to do this himself with a special prosecutor. But you can be sure the Bureau of Rights, what do they call it? Human Rights in the Justice Department will reopen under Biden. And there can be investigations to see if any civil rights, the Bureau of Civil Rights will be refreshed, reopened, and this is a civil rights case for sure that has very stringent penalties, including jail time.
And on the election race, as you kind of touched on there, Ed, we're seeing record levels of early voting in this election. It really blows previous figures out of the water. Now, the race, particularly in the Senate, Texas, this is a possibility you've mentioned a couple of times, but the Biden team is actively investing money in the hopes of turning Texas blue. I mean, like the famous blue
Not
rose
just
Texas.
for Biden, but in the Senate as well. The lady who's running against Cronin is only 3 points behind. Beto was 6 points behind the day of elections. So it's possible that they could turn the Senate in Texas. And this is a case where the Senate, like in Arizona, may lead the president. People voting for a senator who they think is close by, who's let them down, will also vote at the head of the ticket for the president. And that's what's happening in Arizona.
You've also flagged the likes of South Carolina, Iowa, Ohio, Georgia. Just how many seats are we looking at up for grabs?
Well, there are 12 Republican seats. Now, let's say 6 of them are pretty tight. The people are likely to win. But the other 6 can be won by Democrats. Iowa especially, where Greenfield has been in front of Ernst in every single poll, including the Des Moines Register, which is one of the best polls in the country. So this could be a win where the Democrats put very little money in it, and she's going to win. The same thing's true in Georgia. The Democrats put they think, well, these white guys are going to win. But all of a sudden, they're very close. And of course, the big one, South Carolina. Oh boy. I think there's some people in South Carolina that want to vote against Graham just because he's been so haughty, so arrogant. They'd like to kick his A. And the black vote there is almost impossible to count. Remember, the black vote put Joe Biden in when he was down in every poll by double digits. So I don't think they really, and apparently South Carolina is going to run a clean election and let black folks vote. Ooh, that's dangerous.
Well, in this race, just about anything could happen at this point, Ed. And I don't know what we're going to be talking about next week, but I'm sure it's going to be plenty interesting. Not even sure where we're going to be recording it from next week, but we will
Maybe
speak
from
again.
the White House. There'll be a lot of room there. The place might be vacant.
Yeah, I don't know how safe I'll feel.
Oh, well, man, you white guys, you got no stamina.
Yeah, deep clean, I think. Deep clean, mate. We'll talk to you then.
Take care, mate.